In this video, we went over the minor glyphs that grant new abilities to players, and to create this list, we looked at roughly 200 minor glyphs that have been in the game throughout its entire history, and the minor glyphs that give players new abilities or almost completely change player abilities to the point where they're practically new abilities. Most of the glyphs in this video have been removed from the Game of the Legion expansion, but not all of them. And at number 10, we have the Glyph of Rain of Frogs. This minor glyph can only be learned by the Shaman class, and when learned, it gives the player access to an ability called Rain of Frogs. This fun little ability causes frogs to fall from the sky at the target location. The Rain of Frogs spell lasts for 8 seconds, has a range of 40 yards, and has a 45-second cooldown. This minor glyph was added in the last patch of Mist of Pandaria. The technique to craft this minor glyph dropped from the Gulp Frogs in the Timeless Isle, and was one of the many glyphs added in patch 5.4. However, the mass slaughter of glyphs in the Legion expansion removed this inscription technique and ability from the game. But this ability was retrained in a form of a toy which can only be bought and used by shamans from the Shaman class order hall. This toy and glyph therefore kept the flavor of being only usable by shamans, and is one of the few select toys in the game that requires a specific class to be able to use. The name of the toy is called the Tadpole Cloudseeker, and it uses the exact same ability originally taught by the glyph from Mop, as well as having the exact same cooldown of 45 seconds. It can be bought by 2 vendors in the game, and all classes can buy it, although shamans can only use it. However, as previously mentioned, only shamans can access this shaman order hall called the Heart of Azeroth above the Maelstrom, and buy it for 50 gold from Flamesmith Langing, the Earthring Quartermaster. And any player can buy the toy from the Elementus Sharvak and Outland Grand for 50 gold as well. Unfortunately, this ability isn't too dramatic and isn't a Rain of Frog, but more of a trickle. Because the ability it grants is pretty tame compared to those that come, the Glyph of Rain of Frog splashes down at number 10 on our list. And at number 9, we have the fun RP-focused glyph called the Glyph of Contemplation. This glyph granted the ability called Contemplation, and was only available to the Paladin class. This ability gives a Paladin a moment of peace as they kneel in quiet contemplation to ponder the nature of the light. The glyph was added to the game at the launch of Mist of Pandaria, but it was then removed from the game entirely in the Legion expansion along with a lot of other glyphs, something you'll be hearing a lot in this video. Because this glyph added so much flavor and lore, especially to RPers, Blizzard took the decision to keep this ability in the form of a tome. This new item that teaches the ability is called Divine Tome Contemplation, and can only be purchased by Paladins from the Argent Crusade Quartermaster in the Paladin class order hall for 50 gold. The Contemplation ability is itself unique in that Paladins can usually perform several other actions while kneeling. Additionally, the ability lasts for 8 seconds and has an 8-second cooldown, meaning it can pretty much be spammed. While the Glyph of Contemplation is fun, unique, and a cool RP mechanism, it really is just that, so it only comes into the number 9 spot. And at number 8, we have another class RP flavored item, this time the Glyph of Confession. This glyph is only available to priests, and was added to the game in Mist of Pandaria. This glyph gives the priest ability Confession, which does about what you'd expect. Upon using the ability on a player, that player would confess. There were 40 confession lines at the beginning of Mop, with another 20 or so added in 5.4, and a few in Warlords of Draenor. Now, we obviously can't list all 60 plus of those lines, but a few of our favorites are, I really like to leap of faith my allies at opportune moments, as well as, I died to an elevator once, maybe more than once. And of course, I sometimes wonder if Tauren tastes like, you know. Not only does this show that the devs understand their game, but also some of them have a little bit of humor as well. As has been the case so far with the first 2 spots, the Glyph of Confessions was removed in Legion, but it also did return as buyable from a vendor. This new toy, called the Scarlet Confessional Book, also received some new convention updates for the Legion expansion as well. This toy can only be used by priests and can only be bought for Karvik Lawrence, who's a rare NPC that spawns in the underbelly in Legion Dalaran. Unlike the Tadpole Cloudseeker and Divine Tome from the 10th and 9th spots, respectively, the Scarlet Confessional Book is harder to come by, both because it's not always available, and not as easily accessible as the other toys, which are located near the order halls. The Confession ability and the toy both share the same cooldown of 6 seconds, but since the toy version of this glyph is harder to get, we're placing the Glyph of Confessions at number 8 on this list. And at number 7, we have a 2-way tie between 2 similar glyphs. These 2 glyphs are the Glyph of Illusions, which can only be used by mages, and Glyph of Disguise, which can only be used by rogues. Both of these glyphs were added in Mist of Pandaria and removed in Legion. Like the tome for the Paladin's Contemplation ability, the Glyph of Illusion was also replaced by a book which was used in order to learn the Illusion ability. This ability allows mages to take on the appearance of another nearby player, or a random NPC for 2 minutes with a 10-minute cooldown. The book to learn this ability, called Mystical Tome Illusion, can be bought from mages from Endora Moorhead, NPC at Northrend Dalaran for 50 gold. Since this item is still an ability learning tome, it is, therefore, much more similar to the original Glyph of Illusion, as they both teach the mage the Illusion ability. However, 2 other items in the game also do this. The toy named Ali's Sky Mirror and the Reflecting Prism, which is a jewel crafting created item. This ability is also similar to the Glyph of Disguise, the second glyph in our number 7 spot. The Glyph of Disguise allows the rogue to take on the appearance of whatever humanoid creature they pickpocket. The Glyph of Disguise actually survived the Legion mass removal of glyphs and still exists in the game today. A scribe has to be trained in mop inscription and have a high enough skill level to be able to make the glyph. Because of how similar they are, and because they're both more original glyphs than the toy items and the previous glyphs it turned into, we're giving the Glyph of Illusion and Glyph of Disguise the number 7 spots on this list. And at number 6, we have another two-way tie, this time between the Glyph of Conjure Familiar and Glyph of Elemental Familiars. It's easy to see why these two were grouped together, since they both allow the player to conjure a friendly minion. The Glyph of Conjure Familiar can only be used by mages, and when it's used, it creates a familiar stone that can have one of 3 different types. The 3 familiars correspond to the 3 mage specs. That is, the Arcane spec is represented with the Arcane minion, Fire mages can summon a Flame minion, and Frost mages can summon a Water minion. Interestingly, the familiar does not depend on whatever spec the mage is in. So, for example, a Fire mage could summon the Glyph of Conjure Familiar and get a Water minion. Unfortunately, these minions do not act as pets or true companions and cannot perform any other actions or pet battles. Different types of minions when placed close to one another will fight each other, however, which is a neat little touch. The Glyph of Conjure Familiar was replaced with a toy item called the Familiar Stone, which is sold by the same NPC that sells the Mystical Tome Illusion in Northrend Dalaran. With the controversial move of mages no longer being able to summon water elementals in Dragonflight, at least mages can take some solace in the fact they have a 33% chance to be able to summon a water familiar with this toy that has a 1-minute cooldown. Moving on to the Glyph of Elemental Familiars, this glyph is very similar to the Glyph of Conjure Familiar, but with a few exceptions. First, it can only be used by shamans. Second, the 3 minions it can summon are fire, water, and nature. These water minions also have slightly different appearances, and instead use the water sprite models from Pandaria instead of a water elemental model. The toy this item was changed to in Legion is called the Raging Elemental Stone. And unlike its mage counterpart toy we mentioned, the Shaman toy has a cooldown of 5 minutes instead of 1. Finally, the Familiar Stone toy actually gives the mage a conjured item to summon the minion, whereas the Shaman toy just automatically summons a minion upon using the toy. And at number 5, we have the Glyph of Flapping Owl. This glyph for druids grants them the ability to use the spell Flap. This ability, which can only be used in the Moonkin form, allows the druid to slowly flap to the ground, reducing fall damage completely. This ability can be thought of as akin to a mage's slow fall ability or a demon hunter's glide ability. This is the first glyph on this list that was added to WoW in the World of Draenor expansion before it was removed in the next expansion after, which was Legion. As with many other abilities on this list, the ability was kept, but in Legion it was changed to be learned from an item in the Druid Order Hall. The Tome of Winds Flap can be purchased from not only the Dream Grove, but also in the Moonglade where it costs 50 gold. The Glyph of Flapping Owl and Flap ability is a direct nod to the laser chicken meme of Boomies, since chickens are known to flap their wings to reduce fall speed. Since the glyph and its ability are not only fun, but actually very useful and can possibly save the player a lot of hurt from a long drop, it slowly falls into our number 5 spot. And at number 4, we have another rogue glyph, this time the Glyph of Detection. Added in Mists of Pandaria, the Glyph of Detection surprisingly teaches an ability called Detection. Using this ability, a rogue can focus intently on trying to detect certain creatures. This allows the rogue to sometimes be able to see stealth players, NPCs, and objects, similar to a demon hunter's spectral sight skill. In Legion, the glyph was removed, and a new way to learn the ability came from the book Dirty Tricks Volume 1, Detection, which can be bought in the Rogue Order Hall or Dalaran Underbelly in Northrend. In fact, this ability is even required to get a rogue-only toy called the Survivor's Bag of Coins within the Ravenhold Manor. The detection ability lasts for 40 seconds and has no cooldown. The Glyph of Detection itself is a reference to the original rogue ability Detect Traps from Vanilla. The ability was later removed and became a passive ability in patch 1.11. Many players were very upset that their swirly ball visual effect was removed, so Blizzard decided to bring it back by popular demand in different forms, eventually becoming the Glyph of Detection. As you can imagine, being able to sense stealth objects, even while you yourself are stealthed, is a very big advantage to rogue combat and team combats in WoW as a whole. In fact, this was such a good thing they kind of normalized the ability to detect stealth creatures across all races eventually, and this glyph basically just lets you see some invisible creatures, like the ghosts in Undercity. Still, being a very popular effect by the rogue community for its visual effect, and actually having some fun Easter eggs gives it a higher spot on our list. And at number 3, we have the Glyph of Zen Flight. This glyph can only be used by monks and enables them to fly on a green misty cloud in meditation. The glyph and ability were added in Mists of Pandaria along with the monk class to the game. The Zen Flight ability is very special for many reasons. First, it's an instant cast mount. While it does only have a riding speed of 170%, the monk can still cast several abilities without having to dismount. However, entering combat will also instantly dismiss the player. Monks can also harvest mats in the open world as well while flying on this mount. When the Glyph of Zen Flight was removed in Legion, it became available from the meditation manual Zen Flight, which is sold in the monk class order hall. However, there's no need to waste your gold on this since monks also now automatically learn Zen Flight abilities since Legion anyway. Why the book remains in the game is a mystery, as it's entirely redundant and can't be used until the player has leveled up and has flying anyway, after which they've already learned the ability. This makes the Zen Flight ability unique in this list since what was once a glyph ability became a baseline ability for every player in the monk class. Still a unique class mount ability that is somewhat comparable to a paladin's divine charger, with some extra bonuses is a pretty cool thing. Up next at number 2, we have a 4-way tie between a handful of glyphs that all do similar things. These 4 minor glyphs allow 4 different classes to use their abilities to walk on water, and in non-traditional ways. By traditional ways, I mean the Death Knight's Path of Frost ability, the Shaman ability Water Walking, the Elixir Water Walking, and the Mount Equipment Flotation Shoes. The first of these glyphs is the Glyph of Burning Speed, which allowed a rogue to walk on water while using their sprint ability. The next glyph is Glyph of the Lakestrider, which allowed a shaman to automatically gain water walking whenever they transformed into ghost wolf form. Then comes the Warlock's Glyph of Nightmares, which allowed the Warlock's Fell State and Dread State to run across water. Finally, there's the Glyph of Water Roll, which allowed a monk to use the roll ability over water. The final 3 glyphs were all added in Mist of Pandaria, and of all 4 of them, they were removed in Legion, and they have sadly never returned. These 4 glyphs provided a major useful ability for one of each class's core speed abilities, and allowed for navigating the world to be much easier than it otherwise would be. Since these 4 glyphs were not only cool, but also very handy for traversing the world, both in and out of combat, they deserved a pretty high spot on this list, so we put them at number 2. And finally at number 1, we have the 2 most useful utility minor glyphs in the game. Both the Glyph of Spirit Roll and the Glyph of Spirit Wolf were added to the game in Mist of Pandaria and provide some time-saving abilities to dead monks and shamans. Before the changes to the death mechanic in the Dragonflight expansion, corpse runs, especially in the open world, could be a pain in Azeroth. These 2 glyphs allowed the monk's roll ability and the shaman's ghost wolf ability to be used while the player was dead. This allowed players to get back to their corpses faster and respawn quicker, and overall made the game much more enjoyable. The only other comparable ability to these 2 glyphs is the Night Elf Racial that turns a player into a wisp upon death and grants them faster movement speed while they're dead. This 25% increase in movement speed is from the Night Elf Racial that's called Wisp Spirit. But with the short cooldown on the roll ability and the instant cast no cooldown ability in Ghost Wolf, the 2 glyphs of Spirit Roll and Spirit Wolf are for all intents and purposes even better than the Night Elf Racial. It's a real shame Blizzard removed these 2 glyphs in Legion, and it's likely they won't return after the aforementioned death updates in Dragonflight. These death mechanics include less punishing respawn timers at Spirit Healers and a greater loss in durability and gear as well. Additionally, the Spirit Resurrection sickness was greatly reduced from 10 minutes down to seconds. Perhaps all these changes are for the better, as the Shadowlands expansion proved that most players don't like to be in the afterlife for too long. But it still would be cool to be able to use a couple of speed movement abilities while dead to quickly get back to your corpse. Alright, and that's it for this video. This video topic is a bit of a hodgepodge, but came out of the idea of doing a video for the top 10 overpowered glyphs. But don't worry, because that video will be coming out shortly. Until then, I'm hirumaredx, and I hope you're not too miffed when I shift through a rift of glyphs.